Welcome to today's panel, How the Best Companies Build Early Warning Systems into Their Comp Plans. Today, we want to talk about a few different topics, how to consistently and proactively evaluate sales compensation plans performance, the key sales compensation metrics you should absolutely be tracking here in 2023, who should be involved in the conversation, and some examples of how corrective action led to some positive results. My name is Justin Lane. I'm the Vice President of Professional Services here at Forma, and I'll be today's host. With me today, I have two people on the panel that I'd love for them to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Nabil.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nabil Alazam. I'm the founder and CEO of Forma AI. In my past life, I came from management consulting around Salesforce effectiveness and sales compensation at ZS Associates. And that led to me thinking of a different approach and a different way to solve the problems with sales compensation at the enterprise level. Excited to be here and excited to dive in and have a great conversation today.
The second person on the panel we're super excited to have today and want to thank her for being here. Elena, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll get into the discussion.
Thanks, Justin. So my name is Elena Lorenzini. I'm a vice president in HP Inc. and I lead the sales compensation, sales experience, and pricing. So it's quite a broad role. As I'm always saying, the role that made me more popular is sales compensation. And I'm sure that you can all relate to that. I'm in HP actually since 23 years. So I'm here. I'm around in the company since a very long time. And I got to compensation actually with the journey. So it was not actually from where I started, but where I landed. I started in IT. I had the jobs in IT, merging and integration. I was in sales operation on country role, regional roles, and worldwide roles. And then at some point, I discovered that I did not do sales compensation. So in my journey, this was missing. And so I decided, I think it was 5-6 years ago. So I joined and I was more on the sales compensation strategy and design, which is actually, the open door to understand better the business of a company, which because I was more in back office operation and IT role. So definitely a change. And I'm also very excited to be here and share my experience because it was, as always, in compensation is quite a journey. So I would be happy to share.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear how people got into sales compensation. I think we find people come from all different disciplines and domains. Nabil, how did you get involved in sales compensation and ultimately end up founding a company that helps companies out with it?
Yeah, I mean, so at ZS Associates, I got brought into the world of Salesforce effectiveness, so territory design, Salesforce sizing, all the way through to comp plan design. I did a lot of work on the sales strategy side. And so you go in, work large enterprises on setting the right strategy. And then I got fortunate enough to be staffed on projects implementing sales compensation platforms. And I think seeing both sides of the equation, the design, and I think, Elena, the point you made around like, you see so much of the business when you're setting that strategy on the comp side, because all of the upstream go-to-market decisions feed into your sales comp strategy, the roles, the profiles, the hierarchy. And so having seen all the inputs into design, and then seeing the disconnect between strategy and execution, that led to the realization that this is a really big problem, and it's a very powerful lever for organizations that can get it right.
All right, Elena, we talked last week a little bit about maybe the past 5, I think you said 6 years just now, and you walked us through this HP sales incentive transformation. Is what the best way I can describe it. Can you share a little bit of that 5-year journey with the audience?
Yeah, I think it was a very important journey for the company because when I joined sales compensation, the way we were doing sales plan design and in general, all the discussion around sales compensation were managed at regional level. At that time, HP was organized in regions, so we did not have a global head of sales. This was definitely one of the challenges we had. So a lot of the discussion were happening region by region, and there was not a sales compensation governance, a place where someone was sitting to take decisions for the company. So this is the time when I got into sales compensation, this was the situation. And one of the reasons why they hired me at that time is because they wanted someone with no experience in sales compensation for a very simple reason: no bias, no history. So I was not there when things were happening in the past, so I was bringing in some way some new perspective. So I came on board exactly to try to make the shift. And it was not easy, okay? So regions had a lot of power. They had the power to decide what to put in their plans, even to design their plans. So this led to a lot of creativity. Every single sales manager could escalate up to their managing director with an idea, because they read somewhere, they heard somewhere that in some companies there were plans like that. We ended up with 600 sales plans. So there was no structure at all. So this was the starting point. A lot of plans, a little bit of anarchy in the way decisions were taken. So first of all, I need to admit that we have been a bit lucky, because at that time, when I came on board, there was a big reorganization. And in the end, they set a head of the commercial organization, someone responsible to take the decision for all the markets, for all the regions. This helped, because at that time, this person, who was a big believer in sales compensation, decided to implement with me a sales compensation steering committee, a monthly meeting to discuss about the priorities, to discuss about the strategy, and go through an extreme rationalization of the entire sales compensation landscape. This was a big enabler for us. Then the MOC to go through this process was difficult. But the rule number one that we established is that all the decisions and the discussion about sales plan design were the output of only conversation about the strategy, which were the priorities for the company for the fiscal year, which were the strategy where the company wanted to focus. And we were doing it for the markets, we were doing by route to market, we were doing by BU. And with this information as an input, my sales compensation plan design team was creating the sales plans. But we were not engaging with anybody in discussion about how do you want your plans. For us, the question was, which are your priorities? Because the knowledge and the expertise to be able to design a sales plan, it comes from creativity, but not only that. You need to have some knowledge, some good understanding. There are some technical challenges. This was the first thing that we changed. The second big enabler was the implementation of an integrated compensation environment. I know that different companies are following different strategies around that. The decision of HP was to build, together with Microsoft, a platform, an internal platform, which, to be honest, was definitely an enabler for everything else, because it is integrated. We have everything. We manage the entire sales compensation process in one platform. The third, which was really important and still ongoing, to clean up the data, because we had all kinds of manual data, Excel file, people providing data to compensation. It is 5 years that we are slowly moving to data automation to get systemic data. And, you know, this rule is broken sometimes by me, because when we have to experiment new businesses, new way to compensate, we need to do a bit of experimentation, and usually this data is not automated. So we still allow a bit of manual data, but with scrutiny. Not everybody sending manual data in Excel. So all the data needs to come from upstream system, from an integrated infrastructure. This was the other big enabler. So I would say that these were the three main ones. Very strong governance. You need to have the support of your top management to take decision. So, and if a decision is taken, no changes. And then you need to go through this process of integrating in a very nice, in a solid platform with systemic data and the discipline around that. Because again, clean up the plans. It's easy to say, it's less easy to do. Something else that I forgot, which is important, we really look at the sales role profiling. So in the past, it was mixed plans, mixed roles. We did a step back. We profile all our sales roles in the company, and we have many. So we really have many different roles. So we went through profiling their roles, their responsibilities, their activities, the interaction they had with the customers. And from that to derive which kind of metrics we wanted to compensate them on. And this is the way we came to some kind of basic plans, and then we built on them. So I forgot the fourth one, profiling of the sales force and understanding really well what these sales roles are doing. It's key to design their plans in a good way.
You mentioned something there that I think is really interesting, and something that I think a lot of folks that are on the meeting today maybe aren't in the same place. But you talked about this transition from people bringing you plan ideas, what they want in the plan, to you flipping that and almost doing what I call like a solution selling of, asking them what do they want from the plan, and then you bringing them the plans. How do other people, or how would tell me how you made that transition? Like, how was it year one, maybe versus today? And is it just sheer force of will? Did you bring the data and kind of show them what the outcome, could be or would be? Or how do you wrest that control and make it better across the organization, as opposed to what you said had this randomness and kind of chaos of 600 plans?
So first of all, as I said, I had a very strong sponsorship from top management, very strong one. So basically, this was the enabler of all the things that happen after, because with him, we agreed to kick off a program, an initiative of this rationalization of the sales plans. And the agreement with him that for 6 months at the beginning, so plans were released for that fiscal year. We said we use the first 6 months in the fiscal year to look exactly into step-by-step strategy. So which strategy we want to have next year. And we agreed to do a pilot of this centralized top-down, we called it top-down plan design, and present 6 months after, at the beginning of the plan design cycle, which was our proposal for the sales plans for the next year, which were completely different from what we had in the past. Again, the key enabler is to get sponsorship from top management. This was an advice I got when I started this journey. And to be honest, it's an advice that I'm giving to everybody. Otherwise, you will have against you all the forces and the different roles in the company, all the sales leaders in the market, in the regions, the category managers, everybody was against that. They love the control on the sales plans. And, we also went through a lot of trainings and a lot of discussion. And usually what I'm always telling everybody, that compensation is not the only tool you have to drive your sales force. It's one of them. So trying to put everything in the sales plans, because people love it, to have, if there is a priority, we want a metric in the plan. So we also try to tell them there are other ways and other tools to push your sales force, not just that. But we also did a few changes from this perspective. But again, for me, top management support is key, up to the CEO if possible, because the forces against this change at the beginning were really strong. And to be honest, if I look at the situation now it's the norm. Nobody is expecting to engage with my organization and talk about sales plans. They know, but there was a big paradigm shift that required this kind of engagement, raising the sales compensation organization up to a level where I could have access to everybody in the company. It was not like that before. So I can talk to anybody. So because this is my role, to discuss about strategy with the leaders, not to talk about plans and data. So this is something else. So top management support for me is the first priority to embark in this program in any company.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on that, I think it really is a digital transformation when you think about all the pieces that have to come together. I mean, as I said earlier, sales compensation is that last lever in executing on all the inputs that feed into the design and the strategy. And I think one of the things that we talked about last week, Elena, is like the concept of one of the biggest bottlenecks for sales compensation truly delivering what it can deliver to the organization is the misperceived or the gap in perceived value to the rest of the organization versus the value that sales compensation can actually bring. And if you can close that gap, one of the easiest ways to do it is to get that buy-in from senior leadership to the broader digital transformation. And it goes back to the other point that you mentioned around the data, right? Like to ensure that end to end, the data is connected. When you update quotas up here, it flows through your entire process and you're not having to go and interject all the 10 or 20 steps in a very disjointed process.
Yes, and data was actually one of the big things that we brought in the discussion that was not there before. Nobody had ever engaged in sales compensation on a data-driven discussion. Now we can go, we always open all our discussion before taking a decision showing the data, because otherwise everybody has opinion. I know that 6 years ago, no, it did not work. So we come always with data, which is not easy because again, HP is a big company and with a lot of positive things, but one of the weaknesses is the integrated data. So sometimes it's very difficult to provide global view of integrated data in a simple way, which is a bit of, I was telling you, one of the weaknesses that we have, provide good analytics, but we are improving. So there is no discussion, no decision where I'm engaged that I don't bring data with me. So it's a way to turn the discussion into fact-based. Otherwise,
Yeah.
compensation drives always a lot of emotions, and it's the salary of the people in sales. It's a big lever for motivation. I
100%.
understand that. On the other side, I mean, bringing data is also leveling this emotion to a more rational way to take decision.
Yeah, 100%. It's as I always say, it's sales compensation is a politically charged and ultimately sensitive topic. And anytime you have any sort of sensitive emotional topic like comp, without data, no matter how you have the conversation, it ends up becoming an emotional conversation. Emotional conversations in business tend to create that politically charged environment. But if you put a factual, data-driven, logical approach to any argument, any presentation, any guidelines, it helps alleviate that.
And just to add back to the question you asked me, Justin, as an advice when you start this process, the other thing is this profiling of the sales roles. At the beginning, I found that this job, and my team as well, as extremely boring and tedious because it was sitting and really thinking through what every single role in the company on sales was doing. But then when we were able to bring it together and share it back, it made also our sales leader thinking if we were really compensating them right. So we try to do this, and it's a massive work of documentation and processes, which is also discipline that usually organizations do not have. So sales compensation is more running after the issues and run and run and run. We try to do a step back and document all these roles and think, I mean, is it a role driven by revenue? Is it margin really a component we want to have? Is it TCV? So this is the discussion that we had. Again, we are not yet at the perfection, but this helped a lot in the journey.
Oh, you're on mute, Jeff.
I always describe this ongoing battle with sales compensation up against change, just dynamic change. You're always rowing upstream. And the minute you stop rowing, you get pushed backwards. It's a never, there's no finish line per se, something to continue to fight against. Nabil, I have a question for you. I think for the people listening today, oftentimes people have this idealized state that other people are in. And to me, like the challenges that Elena mentioned, I just want to get your opinion on how common are these ideas of fragmented tools, data that needs addressing, maybe from a quality issue, sales compensation not elevated to the correct level within a company. Are these common or uncommon problems that we run into as we talk to companies?
I mean, I think to some extent, one across all engagements I've done in my past life as a consultant, all the way through what we see at Forma, it's a common theme. And I think that point on connected SP, like to have a sales compensation platform that's truly solving the problem, it needs to be connected. And I think there's, here's kind of just to push and kind of, back to the concept of the topic that's at hand. When designing a comp plan, to Lena's point earlier, okay, we want to design towards that the objective of what the plan is. So sales leadership, this is the strategy that you want to go after the market. This is the outcome that you want to drive. So we're going to design a plan that does that. And as a sales comp team, I think when we are limited by just the execution elements, and we're not having a connected platform that has access to all the data, one, we may be limited in what we can actually execute/track. So a perfect example is, and just something to think about is, when you're designing a plan and you're actually looking to roll it out, are you just looking at the data that is on the output of the plan, aka what you are measuring from a performance metric? Or are you able to look at those early leading indicators, the KPIs, that are telling you if that component of the plan is actually working? So if the part of the strategy is to roll out and derive an increase of some sort of behavior from the sales team, is there a KPI that we have ingested into the data within the SPM platform that is going to enable you to track and the effectiveness of that new component that you've rolled out well ahead of the expected final outcome? And in most organizations, that is very disjointed. And I think if you have to step out and go do analytics on the plan design elsewhere, and then take that and feed it back into another part of the process, it ends up slowing down how fast and how agile you can be.
Yeah, and just a comment on that, Nabil. As I was mentioning, this is a weakness for us in HP. And one of the reasons of the weakness is because we have been victims in the last years. Before we had our transformation, then we had COVID. That was a chapter on its own. We kept on changing our plans. And if we keep on changing the plans half after half, because we run our design process twice a year, a big one and then one for minor changes, plans keep on changing and we have not enough data to be able to drive the proper conclusions. We improved a lot in the past year, so we have now enough data to drive some analysis, but it's more backward looking. We are not really able to do it real time, which is a big limit. And the reason why we are not able to do it real time, because unfortunately, for the fact that HP is not yet at the end state in terms of data integration, the data are flowing to compensation with the time lag. So we do not have real-time data, not yet. I mean, it will take probably a couple of years for HP to get there. This means that our plans are running and we are able to assess how they have performed maybe a couple of months after we close the half. But we started already the next cycle. So we are always a bit out of phase to be ready to use the data for the next cycle. It's a weakness and we are fully aware, but we have a dependency on the capacity to ingest the data almost real time. So I am on a plan, I do something today, I see it next week, okay? Not in 2 months, which is one of the complaints we get very often from our sales force. We did a big improvement in this domain, but as you can imagine, since we pay on many different kind of data and different metrics, to get there, it's a long journey. So I don't know, this is really our aspirational goal, to get to a point where our plans are running and we can keep track of how they are doing, if we are really achieving what we wanted to achieve. Now we do an analysis every half, which is telling us a lot, but not enough.
Yeah, I mean, and just to kind of continue to touch on that. So in the ideal state, right, we're setting up that data ingestion pipeline to not just collect the data that we're using to pay out, but also to collect the data that's going to be that leading indicator. So a perfect example is you think about, okay, I have all this data in my CRM on activity at a rep level. And if, for example, we're rolling out an incentive that's pushing our reps to target, upstream or high, more enterprise customers because of the macroeconomic climate, we roll out an incentive that's going to drive that. Are we seeing an uptick in activity of a certain type of behavior? If we're not ingesting that data, that activity data, if we're not ingesting it, we're not going to have access to build a dashboard for our assessment of plan effectiveness. But secondly, one thing that we always kind of run into is this concept of crediting and attribution of performance data is a tough part of sales computation, right? It's you need to credit, you need to run that crediting engine in order to feed into the sales computation calculations. But we need to think about that crediting and that attribution to the KPIs and that we're looking at assessing plan performance. So when we design it, and again, this is very aspirational. A lot has to be done. A digital transformation for most businesses to get to this future state. But in the ideal future state, when I design a plan, I'm not just designing a plan for the rep. I'm actually designing a dashboard for the plan effectiveness as a comp team. And so in real time, as I start to see the early KPIs, are we seeing more emails to the customer segments that we're driving? Are we seeing more conversations, more calls and touch points with the right segments of customers that was supposed to be driven because of this incentive? And in the ideal state, we're not just setting a performance target for the end sales rep based off a plan. We're actually setting a target for the early KPIs at a plan level upstream. Now to do that, that's again, very aspirational. Not only you have to solve the problem for sales competition pipeline, you have to solve it for the upstream activities and how they connect to that incentive structure.
Yeah, you describe something which is really our dream. So in HP to get because we have the data. It's just that we never had the time so far for all the things. I tell you, COVID had a big impact on also the way it was used in HP, had a big impact on our workload and the entire organization. But this is really our aspirational goal. Use all the data that are available in HP because we collect a huge amount of data and bring them together and ensure that we are able to compare what is the trigger. Because, sometimes we do changes in the plan because we have in mind that we want to do more this, more that, but then it's very difficult to track the evolution of that. We did it in some very special cases because we created some kind of booster on orders, a specific kind of orders. And then we were monitoring very closely if it was really happening. But we could do it on a very specific area, not on a broader scale. But this is in the plan, in the strategy, not in the plans. Definitely not for this fiscal year, but what you describe is really, if you have it, the level of control you can have in general on the strategy, on your sales force would be really big.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and the part, just to add, like, when you need to make a change, and no one wants to make a mid-cycle change, right? It's a disruption to the sales team. But when you need to make a mid-cycle change, having that data to back that decision, it changes the conversation from an emotional one where the sales leadership might be pushing against the change when we know that it might be good for the business. It becomes a data-driven decision, as hard as the decision is to make. So,
yeah.
So I want to unpack this just a little bit, because I think, again, for people that are listening, I believe that the most common practice for companies is to design an annual sales compensation plan. They go through a once-a-year design process. They're pulling data from systems. They're doing a level of analysis that they can do, whether it's in-house or with a third-party consulting firm to do so. But at some point in time, they're looking into a crystal ball. They're guessing at the future. They're relying upon an idea of zero entropy, that the past data is going to perfectly predict future performance. They make some decisions, they roll out the plan, and that's it. Nabil, what you're describing is we go through the same methodology. Maybe we try to look for other data inputs or sources that help us predict the future besides just the past. But then we create a self-sustaining analytic system that allows us to see where we're at any point in time in real time. Is that kind of the vision that you described that Elena is looking for? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the vision. If, again, there's a lot of work that has to go into setting up that data pipeline, that connectivity. I mean, I think a quick, say quick hack or like an easy win is to just take that mindset in the design process today, right? When we are actually, well, first, to Elena's point, take ownership of comp plan design. And I think that's a very powerful move that the business can make, because we can set the right strategies to get to the outcome, not just execute on everything that's pushed to us. But so you set a design of a plan. I think one of the biggest things that we can think about is, what are there any data points? I mean, that example that you gave, Elena, is perfect, right? It's isolated, but there was an example where I can track and see the performance of that order data, right? And so, is there some sort of data that we can collect? And a quick win is to, pull that data on a certain cadence, maybe 30, 60, 90, see how we're actually performing. Is there any sort of uplift? And one of the things, by the way, it's very telling when you look at this data. If there is a KPI that's going to showcase a behavior change, it's not always that the comp plan is not the right plan. The number of times we see that reps just didn't understand the mechanic of the plan. And so the question then is you get a leading indicator telling you the behavior that we're aiming to drive, or that we hypothesize to drive, is not happening. Therefore, is it education? Is it an actual misaligned incentive? Or is it something else that we need to investigate further? And I think even if it's a manual pull of that data and a manual assessment, it can be a pretty powerful lever of kind of ensuring that we have the right strategies deployed.
Yeah, I think this is for Elena as well. Like this idea, I think, we've talked about looking at where the key measures within a plan, how are they performing? Are we getting the motion and motivation that we wanted from the plan? Are there other things outside the plan? Quickly to my mind, this idea of one, we could be checking whether reps understand the plan or not. Retention comes to mind. Are there other things outside of kind of looking at the core metrics that would be nice to track to help with these ideas?
Yeah, and we did it. Usually, sometimes we do randomly, not with high frequency, because, you know, trying to survey or do roundtable with sales, it's something that we try to do on an exceptional basis, because there is always this concept that if they spend too much of their time in talking to operations people, this is not something that they really like. So we try to avoid. But once a year, usually, we take a sample of sales by role, mixing the seniority, mixing also top performers with low performers. We bring them together and we interview them with a set of questions. And then we organize a roundtable to discuss about the output of their questions. And a lot of questions are, do you understand your sales plan? Because, you know, sometimes we hear feedback that our plans are too complex. But then I'm always saying, yes, our plans are too complex, but then if there is a sales guy and he misses $1 from his compensation, he's able to build in Excel the entire compensation credit in Logic. So I'm not a big believer that sales do not understand the plans if they are complex. I think they do. But, you know, simplicity is something that we try to advocate. And for us, you know, I have an entire organization which is making sure that once the plans are deployed, they go and train the entire sales force, talk to them, keep on some kind of open door where they can go and ask questions. Because for us, making sure that sales understand their sales plans is key. Because if they don't, basically they have something, they have a mission to do and they don't know where they are going. So this is something that we definitely do. So training and do good communication around the sales plan. If we do big changes and we implement plans or levers in the plan that were not done before, which we try to modernize the way we do compensation. So sometimes we bring levers and into the plans that we never had. Slopes, we never had slopes, and I don't tell you how painful it was. It is the process to bring them in. So we change things. Usually we try to structure the communication a little bit different. So we try to prepare a communication package, which is really guiding them through the change. Clearly, it's not something that we can do for all the plans, but when there is something new, we structure a very detailed communication, maybe with videos. So we try to be modern and give them enough information to be able to do it. And we got a very good feedback about that. This communication package, which are really customized for more complex plans. Let's say if it's a basic revenue and margin plan, I think that it's enough we explain. But if we start creating kickers or more complex way to treat the data, we really want them to understand in details.
Yeah, Nabil, we've talked about this before. I always call this the Goldilocks problem. Not too simple, not too complex. You know, it has to address, you're trying to address a particular problem for the company, and you want to make sure you have enough things in there to do that, but not too many that are distraction. Incentives, create focus.
And just this is the point where you start, you move out from matrix and you start including kickers, gates. And usually I also have a mixed feeling about the gate and kickers and these things, because yes, they bring more complexity. And I think that if we try to keep simple, so if the plans are simple, it's easier for the reps to go and execute. If we start creating kickers, especially the more junior sales force tend to get lost into what it really means and so on. So we usually have this debate. We are experimenting a bit now from this perspective, because we came to a point where HP had many priorities, not one, not 3, 10. So what do you do at that point? If each of them requires a lot of attention from our sales force, how you bring them into a plan. So we had to experiment a bit with kickers and accelerators of multipliers. So we experiment on a few things. But the other change that we need, trying to diversify a bit the way we compensate, because we have sales plans, then we have bonuses, and we try to be limited with the bonus programs because we also come of a history where HP had hundreds of bonus programs. And, when you have too many, in the end, you don't even know what you're doing once again. So we have bonus programs. And from this fiscal year, we introduced a gamification tool. So we want to try to give them short-term goals. And usually they are non-cash incentives to give a small burst of attention to some specific areas where we know that the company needs attention. And this diversification of the portfolio of the tools we use was really welcomed from the company. And I think that one of the reasons is that we need to consider as company leaders that the age of the sales force now span on different generations. So I have in HP some old style reps that like their compensation plan and, but, we have the younger generation are looking for something completely different. And when we brought this gamification tool and the contest and the leaderboard, they were super excited. The older generation, a bit less. Not everybody can be happy in the same way.
100%. I mean, there's a question that actually came up around asking: is this future state exist, and are there there are companies that are applying this of kind of like having the data all integrated? And your point right there around the gamification. I mean, I would say that the pinnacle that sales comp should be aspiring to is there are incentives in our day-to-day lives that operate at a level of individualized. If you think about it, the most extreme end, a social media platform that is tailored. When you go to that newsfeed, it is tailored to your behaviors. Every interaction is meant to capture more time, more of your eyes on that screen for longer. And that's if you think about kind of an extreme end of incentives and how you serve it up. I think about a closer analogy would be a loyalty program. And loyalty programs deploy incentives on in a much faster fashion on an A/B testing it, measuring the success within certain segments and pools before deploying to the masses. And so again, another kind of an industry that's been applying these tactics that we're all talking about here for some time. And to address the actual question, I think there are companies that are doing this and doing this well. The key is it's executive sponsorship 100% because it's a digital transformation. It's going to shift the way the organization works. And the data, the upstream data warehouse that feeds into sales performance management needs to be all encompassing, right? And I hear this all the time. You think about, you set up a this is a common thing that I hear in the industry of, oh, we can, you bring in your opportunity data from Salesforce and you can kind of, or your CRM, and you can share with the rep exactly how much they're going to make based off the opportunities they have in their pipeline. The gap is the attribution. Can you actually apply the same level of logic and attribution to the opportunity data as you do their actual transactions? And that's where it falls apart. But if you set up the data pipeline upstream in a robust way, and you have the executive sponsorship to change that data process all the way through and have it connected, you start thinking about attribution way upstream, like further upstream, and actually change the way that you're tracking the data all the way through the process. If you think about sales compensation as just being the end lever, that you're thinking about it as an execution to all the strategies set before, versus having it be a part of the end-to-end pipeline and inclusive of the strategy and design. Yeah. And I think there's certainly, it is not out of the realm. It's all possible. It's just that you need that level of buy-in and that digital transformation. And there are companies that are doing it. I think the ones that are successful are capturing all their data. I'll give one example because there's another question that came in around the shift to consumption-based model, and it got me thinking of this specific example. One of our customers actually had a effectively consumption-based plan, but they actually they have enrollments into their, consumption of their software. And one of the leading indicators that they were using was the consumption, or effectively the enrollments of the customers, and the level of consumption over time was the leading indicator of the success of the customer in the long term. And so again, tracking that as an example is something that they were able to do to assess their plan effectiveness in real time. But it is a vision that companies are, I would say it still takes a lot of work, and it's aspirational, but it's certainly possible if there's the right buy-in.
So Nabil, we have an internal team at Forma that we call, I'll call it, it's a product, tech-enabled service that we call revenue optimization. And we help people with this idea of what's working and what's not working within their plans. To be very specific for folks out there, what sort of analytics package do we provide that we think that people should be looking at? And I guess, as a follow-up to that, even, how early in the year can we start to see if the plans are having the impact that they want?
So I think it depends on just the final answer. It depends on the plan. It depends on the incentive. I think every incentive is going to have a different leading indicator. And the way to think about this is, I mean, this is it's a part of the way that we built the platform, part of the approach, but it's not, this is all stuff that we can, again, do to some extent within the team. So it's, I want to step back and kind of approach the framework of when you design a plan, you're effectively designing the KPIs that you're tracking against it. And if you think about any incentive, you have some sort of potential that you're looking to get. You think about a behavior that you're going to drive with the sales force to capture that potential in the market, and then you put the incentive to drive that behavior. And the analytical framework that you need to think about is constantly assessing the potential that you're trying to capture and achieve, to be able to set and understand what we're going after. From there, it's as a part of the plan design and the creativity aspect of sales compensation. Lena's point is, what are the incentives that we're going to use to drive the behaviors that the business needs? And it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, but the science comes in by setting those KPIs that we're going to track well ahead of time and well ahead of the final outcome, so that you can assess. And so the way to think about it in the way that we approach it is, it's not setting it up to be a static once every year plan design assessment process, but rather building these analytical models to run in real time. Every time the data load is updated, every time you're ingesting data to process commissions for your reps, you're not just ingesting data to process commissions, you're actually ingesting data to update the analytical model and rerun the analysis to figure out, are the incentives actually working? Are they driving the result? And so the analytics becomes as frequent as the actual commission calculations themselves.
Okay, I think that cleared it up even for me. I think this idea of simultaneously, as when going through the design process of setting the key KPIs, bringing the data in and then measuring it against that makes a lot of sense. Elena, I love this idea too of asking the business, what do they want from the comp plans? Because I think that very naturally flows into the idea of that's now the KPI that we're going to measure against for these plans, that they're getting what they wanted from the plan, whether that be a share of business in a particular country, or a shift in product mix, or address margin, or address retention. Kind of their ask of what they want from the plan is something that could be tracked in conjunction with the plan. So to expand the idea, I think another area around sales performance management that people have tremendous difficulty is with quota setting. Could we do something similar there?
So quota setting is actually the focus that we have in my own sales compensation strategy for this year, for a very simple reason. When COVID came, we moved everybody on country or team quota. So, when you set these big goals and you put everybody on these big numbers, the variation of the performance is smaller. So you can do mistakes, and the risk of overperformance or underperformance is limited. Now we started going back to an individual quota because we wanted to get back to some kind of normal, bring back some kind of competitive and aggressive sales culture that we lost over the years, because it was really problematic to manage a sales force when the business was completely unpredictable. Headwind, tailwinds in different pieces of the companies. Then we had all kinds of supply challenges. It was really very, very difficult. So we kept everybody contained in terms of acceleration framework, not only in terms of quota, country quota, very contained acceleration framework. So we leveled everybody to the same point. So no big variation. Now we are trying to go back to individual quota, and it is a challenge because if we are on individual quota needs to be precise. And we started digging into the way quota setting was done, which is a giant process in HP done by many people in Excel. and it is very heavy and cumbersome. So what we decided to do this year is to pilot on few areas and use quota analytics. I think we are very successful to do it on our channel business because I think it's a bit easier. So our aspirational goal is to have all the output of quota setting done by an analytics tool, share it with finance, give them the opportunity to review the numbers, click on a button and load it. We are that close on channel. On our entire end user population is a little bit more complicated because the variation, the history, so it's more complicated. But our aspirational goal is not to have an army of people touching the data, rethinking, oh, sorry, I changed my mind, and then being very late with our sales letter, but run it through advanced analytics. And I have a team with me that is working on the models for quota setting. And again, we have been extremely successful now over the last couple of years on channel. The goal this year is to move also on the rest of the end user population and do it with analytics. This requires a very strong partnership with finance and a very strong partnership with the category teams who are owning the P&L for the company, a very strong partnership with the business planners. So even in this case, a very strong sponsorship from above, because to bring all this data together, I don't own quota setting for the company. So I wanted to be the facilitator of a process in a faster way, which puts me in a difficult position unless I have a very strong support from management.
Yeah.
But the
So you
quality
mentioned
of quote, I think
yeah.
it's a pain point for many companies. And I mean, it has been definitely for HP. And it is now that we are trying to move into this analytics model.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, again, it needs to be connected because at the end of the day, a lot of incentive structures are so tied to the targets that we set. I mean, they're so tied to the targets that we set that without setting the right targets, it ends up a lot of those tail indicators, like the KPIs we're talking about, end up kind of falling out. But
Yeah, I see a question that came in, and Elena, you mentioned the word, I think, aggressiveness. We're trying to get back to something that's a little more aggressive. And the question is, what are the best ideas on how to set leverage for the plans? Like, again, this concept of dialing in, the aggressiveness of the plan. I think it's very much tied to pay mix as well. We have some experts on the panel. Any thoughts on how to set leverage in a particular plan?
Well, let me tell you the way we did it in HP, because we changed a bit the philosophy over the years. And again, we have these years of COVID that unfortunately our data are frozen to past data, because 2020 and 2021 for HP was very strange years. COVID and then an explosion of business and then struggling. So we do not have a big history of reliable data. But what we are doing to set the leverage for our plans is that we really look at historical data. And again, we have a bit of a void for these years, but we try to consider and factor in the changes that happen. Our goal as a company is to bring the 10% of our sales force to an excellence point. So we look about on the historical data that we collected over the time, and we try to calibrate our accelerators to bring the top 10% up to that level. Unfortunately, HP as a philosophy, the philosophy in HP is not really open to big changes. Ideally, we would like to implement some kind of a dynamic framework. So really to make sure that we calibrate every single plan with this model. First of all, we need to face the fact that HP is a global company. So we have a footprint in every single market of the planet, and do this kind of changes over the year in Europe, over the time in Europe is not so easy. We have worker council, a lot of complexity in terms of legal, taxes, human resources. So we are not so flexible. So in the end, our aspirational goal is every year to shift from the accelerator model to make sure we bring our 10% of the sales force up to an excellence point, but trying to limit the accelerators to 4 or 5, not too many. And I know that it's a bit contradicting the data. At the same time, it's very difficult to explain to a salesperson why your colleague on the same plan, just with a bigger quota, has a bigger accelerator. So it's very difficult for them to understand that. So we try not to create too many variations, but this is what we want to do. We have this concept of excellence. We want to bring for every plan, 10% of the salesperson, people on that plan needs to be above an excellence point. And the excellence point, we have the different ways to set it. And I know there are also here different approach from the company. We use some benchmark that we got from our companies by sales roles what is considered the excellence point in terms of quota achievement. So this is the way we set it.
And then at that point, have you seen, are the plans at excellence getting richer or less rich in terms of that leverage to total target comp? Or are you thinking it at 2x? I know at some point in time, people would be as aggressive as 3x, to excellence point. And I've seen more and more plans that are more like this 1.25, 1.5. It seems like people are taking some money out of
No,
the
we
top
are
end of the
going
plan
way
for
more
one reason or another.
aggressive, Justin. Our acceleration can go up to 6 or to 8, but it's also depending how big is your quota. Because I mean, the bigger is your quota, the higher should be your acceleration to bring you to the excellence point. So we have some kind of global account managers that are carrying really big quota. So for them, the accelerator is really, really high, but also the likelihood
On a
that they
big
hit
number.
yeah. So this is the way we do it. So we really try to differentiate by role and by quota size. And sometimes also by market size. How big is the market? Because we have very small countries where in the end, the country quota is the quota for a rep. So maybe you have only one sales rep to cover all the businesses and all the different segments. So we do a lot of data analysis work to set our accelerators and to make sure we get to this point. We were not very successful in the last fiscal year because of the quota setting problem. This is why we brought it back and I said, guys, we need really more attention. Otherwise, we do all this analysis on the data. We set our accelerators. If quota is wrong, I mean, all this discussion is basically dead because we don't even bring the people to get to 100% of quota achievement, not even the excellence point. So it's a delicate, again, for compensation to work, you need to have good sales plans and good quota combined together. Otherwise, it's theory that does not turn into practice.
Yes. And I think, the point, the interesting concept there is, in the best models I've seen, you tie the statistical confidence that we have on a quota by quota level, and you can use that as an input to tweaking the pay curves and the accelerators. Because the standard model is, okay, well, the larger the quota, the harder it is to overachieve, and therefore we can significantly overpay. But in some cases, even larger quotas, there could be a lot of big swings if there's, and again, larger the quota, the more, I would say, to some extent for some businesses, there's foresight into what is possible, because those pipelines tend to have much longer sales cycles. And so if you bring in that data to give you an assessment or understanding of what is our statistical confidence of quota X versus quota Y, you can almost use that as an input to, again, better refine those acceleration points and drive that outcome.
Yeah.
Elena, quick follow-up question on the leverage. I think somebody asked the idea, at the excellence point from an earnings potential, if their total target compensation was let's say 100K at target, at that excellence point, would they be expecting to make something like actual 600K, or is it more like 200, 300 type of $1,000? And to get there, the rates are 6x, like a base commission rate or an individual commission rate?
So basically the way our plan works is that they will get from zero. Okay, now we are trying to introduce the slows, but let's leave this discussion aside because it's very painful and we did not introduce them yet. We are trying to agree on it because the higher you go with the acceleration, you need to counterbalance a bit on the lower part. Otherwise, it's not really an aggressive sales culture because it's aggressive only if you really are a good performer. If you are a low performer, no changes. So basically our plan works that from 0 to 100, $1 that you sell, $1 that you get. The moment you hit 100%, then you start multiplying by 6. Every dollar becomes $6. And you go up on this scale till a point that usually in the past we had deceleration at some point. We removed it because we believe that it was extremely penalizing. We want to incentive our sales force to sell and be the best. We don't want to cap their compensation. We were doing it in the past, but again, it was a measure that we implemented mainly during COVID because we had basically no control on the performance of anybody. Even in country quota, we had cases where people were doing 600 of quota achievement in a half. So a lot of variation.
Bill, this question might be best addressed by you because I think you probably deal with, you're somebody who deals with the board. Any ideas on how boards think about the question is human capital risk inherent in seller compensation? Like what do boards want to see from a metric around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if you think about the analogy I'll give is marketing spend. If you're presenting marketing spend to senior leadership, whether it's executives of the board, and you said, we're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars on these 5 campaigns, and I'll tell you in 2 years or in a year from now how well they worked and what our return is, you'd get laughed out of the room, right? You have to come in with an approach and a strategy and this element of you're constantly measuring the effectiveness of every dollar spent on every campaign, on every ad, and throttling spend up and down. And so I think when you think about sales compensation being one of the largest cost centers in the business, right? On average, I think it represents 9-10% of top line revenue for companies. We have to think, and there's actually another question, that came in on that I saw on how do you get buy-in from the executive team on shifting to kind of take on the sponsorship and getting that sponsorship. And it comes back to the same concept of, one, it's showcasing that for every dollar of, and it could be finding very specific examples, but for every dollar of well spent and well designed comp, the lever of performance and uplift is so high. And I mean, Alina, you talked about the kind of non-financial incentives. I mean, we've seen this firsthand. In some cases, a simple incentive can drive a massive uplift in sales. And I think using that as an example to showcase the need to take every dollar of sales comp as seriously and apply the rigor in the same way. And so to the board, it's no different. It's actually creating a dashboard that we can showcase and measure the effectiveness of comp plans and bring it to that level of executive. But it's easier said than done, because I think there's it takes I would say a data-driven mindset at the very senior level of organization. And the problem with sales comp is that the practitioners that are in the weeds, that are solving this problem day to day, are tackling both a technical and a data problem. But the individuals at the senior level that are going to that you have to bring in to get buy-in do not necessarily have visibility to all the complexity and the disjointed process across the organization. So to make this a problem that they care about, you have to highlight, again, if you think about the agility and being able to shift, I mean, the example that I used in marketing, I mean, you don't wait until the end of the year to stop spending on a campaign that's not working. You stop spending in the moment that you're not seeing the effectiveness from a marketing perspective. Why do we not think like that for sales comp? And I think it's actually pushing leadership and questioning the decisions that we make on that as an example.
And I see that
right.
someone is asking about caps. I'm sorry, I want still but since I always get this question, and I loved to ask the question when I was deciding what to do. We don't have any cap in our plans anymore. What I'm trying to do is to bring slopes in so that we don't cap. If you are really good and you did a very good job, you need to get your money. At the same time, to counterbalance, because if we don't cap, there is the risk that we spend a lot of money on some of those sales. We wanted to create some kind of deceleration on the low part of the scale of their performance, which for me is more a motivation for the good guys and also a bit of a motivation for the people who are lagging behind. So I'm not a fan, and I know that many other companies like HP are not fun. And so, and again, this is my personal opinion, and we removed it. They were there, and now we don't have caps anymore, because I see that someone was asking about that.
Yeah, and real quickly, I want to say thank you to everybody who attended today. Thank you for all of the questions that have come in. We didn't get to all the questions, though I see a couple themes that I think will be future ideas, certainly around like consumption-based models and shifting from recurring revenue to consumption base. But thank you so much for attending and asking the questions. For Nabil and Elena, I'll start with Elena. Any final thoughts for the audience today? Any last piece of advice?
Yes, I have an advice, which is something that helped me really a lot in the last years. It was the connection with other people in other companies having my same role? Because someone was asking in the question if there is any company who reached this ultimate goal of perfect sales compensation. The answer is no. And I can tell you because I have a very frequent interaction with my peers in IBM, in Microsoft. So I know very well what is their status. Each of us became very good in a part. And the conversation and the information that we are exchanging are really what can trigger a change. So I used a lot in the past the experience of other companies who were much ahead of HP in terms of transformation. I got their advice and I used them to build my own roadmap. And I constantly went back. There is a big collaboration that needs to happen in the background. So getting the feedbacks from other companies is key. So from this perspective, feel free to reach out to me if you wanted to discuss more in details what we did for HP. The help that was given to me by other companies was great. So it was a big leverage point. And this is why, talking to Nabil, I feel that it's good to share. And again, every company comes with an experience, and sharing it can help you to get some ideas. And maybe it will take years to set in motion, but a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So there should be a place from where to start.
Nabil, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want to echo, everything Elena just said. I think in our last conversation, there is a lot of complexity, a lot of challenges that need to be addressed by the sales comp team, and it's a long journey, the one that needs constant reinvention and redesign. And I think thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Elena, for joining and kind of helping pass it forward and sharing with everyone else that's going through the same journey.
Well, thanks to you for the invite, Nabil and Justin. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.